this is using standard deviation to compare students' writing scores. Here are the first 5 rows of the data frame. Now, notice that this actual data frame is super huge. It has 1,000 students, and so I'm actually using the entire data frame. So I linked the data frame in the description box below and also in these slides, which I'll also be linking down in the description box below. But these are just the 5 first rows of the data frame. Okay, this is a distribution of student writing scores. If you want to know how to plot this distribution using Python, I'll link that video down below as well. But this is the distribution of student writing scores. Okay, now the question we want to answer is how did the students perform in their writing class relative to each other? Now the way we can do this is by plotting the standard deviations or just finding the standard deviation first and using the standard deviation to kind of describe their location or basically in context, basically how they did relative to each other in their reading class. So the first thing to do is to find the average reading score. So you would do that by adding up all the reading scores and dividing by the number of reading scores, which I believe is 1,000 in this case. So I wouldn't recommend to do it manually. I would use Python or Excel, but I did Python. I used Python for this, right? Okay, so this is basically the average plotted in the distribution. So the average line, that's what you can see in the plot right here. Next, you will find the standard deviation. So this is actually supposed to say how many points do each student's writing scores deviate from the average writing score. Okay, so that's basically the definition of standard deviation in this case, right? So I provided the formula for you, and in context, standard deviation is equal to the square root of the sum of the writing score minus the average writing score squared divided by the number of students, which is 1,000 minus 1. Now, if you want to know why we're subtracting 1, I'm going to link that video also down in the description below. I'll talk about what the minus 1 means. Okay, so this is basically how I found standard deviation using Python. I imported pandas SPD, which is the library that allows me to import the data frame. Yeah, so I imported the data frame. I don't believe I added that here. But I'm actually gonna write it for you right here. So it should be something like data frame is equal to pd dot read CSV, and then it should be the name of the file. So just paste that in there, and then that should have just been what should have been there. And then you would do the STD is equal to DF writing score dot STD, and then that's going to give you your standard deviation, right? So that's 15.1957 rounded. So what does this mean in context? Well, this means that each student's writing score deviates around 15.1957 points from the average writing score of 68.054 points. Now, this is basically the standard deviations plotted. So you can see that the average is the black line in the middle, and then one standard deviation above the average is obviously adding 15.1957 points to the average, right? So that's going to be one standard deviation above the average, and you can see that visually with the green dash line above or to the right of the average, but to the left of the average, that's actually one standard deviation below the average, and then so on and so on and so on. Now, using this plot, we're going to be comparing students' reading scores to each other and to categorize them either in below average, within average, or above average. So again, I use this example in all of these videos. Basically, let's say you are a high school teacher and you are told by your supervisor that you have to recommend only the people who excelled in your class to an honors class for the next year, okay? So you can only recommend those who excelled in your class, and so you are going to only recommend those who are above average, right? And that's what we're going to do right now. So we did our calculations, we found our standard deviations, we plotted them just so we could get a little bit of help here. And now we're going to use the students that are right below here and figure out where they stand relative to each other. So for student number 0, They got a writing score of 74. So now if we look at where 74 is here on the graph, we know that the average is 68.054, so 74 is actually going to be right around here, so one standard deviation above the average. And so because it's one standard deviation above the average, or it's within one standard deviation above the average, we're going to say that student 0 is actually within average. So let me go ahead and write that down. So student 0 is going to go within average because, again, if you are within average, you're going to be between one standard deviation plus or minus the mean. Not the mean, from the mean, excuse me. If you are above average, you're going to be two standard deviations above the mean or within two standard deviations above the mean. And if you are below average, you're going to be two standard deviations below the mean, okay? And then super below average would be like 3 standard deviations below the mean, so that's going to be this red line over here. And then super above average is going to be 3 standard deviations above the mean, okay? So student number 0 is within average. Student number 1, this student got a writing score of 88. If you locate where 88 is over here, I know that 88 is actually somewhere over here, and I know that this is 83, so 88 is over here. So 88 is actually within 2 standard deviations above the mean. So where are we? Yeah, so sorry. So 88 is actually within 2 standard deviations above the mean. So we have 1 standard deviation and then we have 2. So they are within 2 standard deviations above the mean, but they're greater than 1 standard deviation above the mean. So because of that, they are actually above average. So student number 1 is above average. Okay. Now, student number 2, this person got a 93. Student number 93, student number 93, please. Student number 2 got a 93. So let's locate where 93 is in the graph. So I know that it's going to be, I know that 2 standard deviations is actually 98, so it's going to be less than that. So I'm assuming it's like somewhere over here. So again, student number 2 is actually above average because they're within 2 standard deviations above the mean, right? So they're within this yellow line right here. So student number 2 is going to go to above average. Okay, student number 3 got a 44. Wow, okay. So this student is actually right over here, and surprisingly, so this means that they are below average. So because they are actually 2 standard deviations below the mean, okay? So this student number 3 is going to go into the below average column. Okay, and then finally, student number 4 got a 75. And surprisingly, 75 is actually right above here. So they are actually within average. So we're going to add 7 for student number, what? Student number 4 in within average. Now, finally, we have our data, okay? So we know that obviously student number 1 and 2 did so much better than student number 3. We know that student number 0 and 4 are within average, so they are okay. But unfortunately, they won't be recommended along with student number 3 for the honors program next year. The students who will be recommended will be student number 1 and student number 2, surprisingly, even if student number 1 had a 74. But yes, considering that the class's average is very, very low, it's actually a 68, a 74 and 88 are actually above average, surprisingly. So this high school teacher is going to be recommending student number 1 and number 2 for the honors class next year. And that's how we can use standard deviation to compare student scores and also to recommend students for honor classes if you are a high school teacher. Thanks for watching this video. Again, any extra things like plotting the distribution or I think I mentioned something else. I don't know, but I'll watch the video again. I'll put the link down in the description below. The data is also there and the slides are also there. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.